sent to all the media, actually we monitored to tell them the outcome of our research. This is one thing we could prove ourselves, and the other one, we are aware of the impact of the debate on migrants, but we just wanted to talk to more migrants and to get migrant voices heard. So migrants can speak, they're spoken about in debate, but no one actually knows about their experiences and how the debate on migration affect them personally. And so we felt, well, this is actually, maybe there's a role for us here to play. So we decided, well, we want to make our voice heard. The main findings from the survey and from the focus groups and interviews, we discovered that the majority of migrants felt that they belong and are well integrated into their local communities and into eco-societies. And we discovered that actually migrants had very clear understanding and definition of what is integration. They were very clear about that, and they spoke about, to work, to be able to speak the language, to contribute to society, to engage, to pay tax, to contribute. They were really clear, and they understood what integration is about for them. It was very clear. Another point from the research told a different story. While most migrants felt integrated, actually the majority of the people we spoke to, and by the way, most of them were young people between 24 and 40 something, so all of them are young people. They felt integrated into the society, and they're doing well. They get on really well with the local communities and friends and colleagues and neighbors, but they saw belonging is something completely different from integration. They saw them as two separate things. And they saw the sense of belonging as influenced by many factors, including factors outside themselves, of course, and their communities. Now, for this, 63% told us that the media and the political debate have an impact on their sense of belonging. And this was very important for us. We discovered actually they're all aware of the debate, and all of them were critical of the debate. And they all know how they are represented. But they also have a specific concerns, not just about the debate and the media. They have a specific, clear concerns about the number of campaigns and policies, like the Go Home ban, like the Stop and Search, the rise of the anti-immigrant groups, the UK posters. All those actually have had big impact on many people, and most people in the workshops actually mentioned them in interviews. They refer to those as actually very damaging and very hurting.
So as Nazak was speaking, one of the things that really occurred to me about this piece of work is that we hear so often that refugees, migrants and asylum seekers are a hard-to-reach group that don't want to talk about their experiences, and it's therefore very difficult to do research with them, when in fact, actually, when you start to do work with people and you actually talk to them as human beings and listen to what they have to say, and this is my experience too, is that people are wanting to speak, but actually no one's listening to what they have to say. So I do think that just regardless of the outcome of the research, I think it's very important to kind of get a message out to a broader constituency that there isn't a reluctance on the part of the community to engage or talk about these issues, but rather people are choosing not to ask them. And I think the other thing that struck me when Nazak was talking was how a lot of people's responses are in terms of their emotions, their feelings about being sad or anxious or scared. And there isn't enough talk in this discussion, debate, whatever we want to call it, about people's emotions. They intrinsically feed through into lots of the debate, and people are very emotional in their responses to migration. They're angry and cross and all of those things that we get to hear about, but we don't get to hear about these kinds of emotions and how that resonates in people's lives. So I think that's really important. And in a sense, what's really clear from the research is that this debate, and we're always doing this when we say debate, but this sort of situation that we find ourselves in is really a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the behaviour of politicians and the media is having the very effect that they claim to be concerned about, i.e. a lack of community cohesion, an anxiety within communities, a lack of trust between communities. Often that trust, that cohesion exists, but these narratives effectively undermine it, because what they're doing is they're creating a conflict narrative. They're positioning communities against each other, and it's not uncommon. It's a very familiar tactic in lots of different situations, that in order to deal with situations, what people tend to do, or what politicians tend to do is to juxtapose seemingly very contrasting and irreconcilable positions. So, in a sense, the debate on migration, if that's what we can call it, it's not really about migration. It's a debate about what kind of society we want to be. And if that's the measure of where we're at in terms of the debate, then most of us, I think, sitting in this room would rather be somewhere else, because this isn't the kind of society we want to be in. Whether we're migrants or non-migrants, we want to live in a different kind of place where there is more tolerance, compassion, and all of those things that represent what we're interested in.
I was really struck by the sort of that final comment, what kind of society we want to be, because while I think we've had some successes in Britain in terms of the spread of tolerance and reducing some racial inequalities, we still have a long way to go. And I think one of the things that I think the sort of findings raise here in terms of the ability of Britishness to include all of us, I think we've been a little bit too relaxed, a little bit too presumptuous, that because Britishness is less ethnicized than Englishness or, say, Swedishness, that it will just naturally flow through generational change and through our sort of predisposition towards tolerance, that everyone will become equally included. And I don't think we've ever actually properly affirmed that we are changing the nature of the society and being an immigrant is part of being British. We haven't positively affirmed that. The large proportion of British-born ethnic minorities, many of whom are also children of migrants, of course, are also speaking out on this issue. And one of the reasons I say that is the very same narratives of go home that are attached to migrants, of course, go to British-born ethnic minorities. Lenny Henry was very famously, very recently, told to go home. Of course, he was born in the Black Country in Birmingham, near Birmingham, and the idea that the sort of narrative that we have on migration is relatively harmless or only attaches to a minority of the population or more recent migrants is completely false. In 1964, Martin Luther King came to Britain on his way to Norway to give a speech where he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and he gave a speech talking about racial justice. And he said of people in Britain that we needed to work more to fight for the rights of migrants and ethnic minorities. And the very year the Campaign Against Racial Discrimination was founded. That is the history of the sort of fight against racism in Britain. And throughout the 1960s and 1970s, all of the people in the anti-racist movement, who were ethnic minorities, were migrants, of course. So there is a history in Britain that we should celebrate, and that as ethnic minorities we should celebrate, that not only was this an anti-racist fight, this was a fight against xenophobia and against anti-migrant views. So I would urge all of us to remember that as a sort of struggle that potentially we can learn from.
I'm also work with Citizens Advice. I've been with them for nearly 10 years. I've interviewed lots of people, and I think it's quite disheartening for me to hear from not only EU migrants, but migrants in general, the way they feel or they perceive they are treated. I'm very careful in terms of talking about discrimination, but a lot of them feel like they are treated differently. And I think in 21st century UK, we shouldn't have this sort of feelings among different communities, so we should have more cohesion. What angers me every morning when I try not to listen to NBC or when I open a newspaper is those ridiculous stories about EU migrants coming here, coming off at Houston King's Cross Station and going to the job centre and get benefits, when we know that it's not true. It is so difficult for EU migrants to access social housing or benefits. So I think the British public needs to understand that. We need to have a balanced debate, because the question of the UK membership to the EU is a big question that's going to affect all communities. And if the public is going to vote, I think we need to make sure that the press is not biased, that the press kind of embrace that, yes, migration has positives, not just negatives according to them. So I just wanted to repeat that responsibility that I think we have, and we need to work together on that. We've launched the Yes to Europe campaign, and the first step in that campaign is to push to lobby the press and to make sure that your voice, my voice, everyone's voice is reflected. Whether they accept what we say or not, I think it's about giving us equal opportunities to speak.
The BBC can do unbalanced reporting on this. It's not the first time they've reported Migration Watch without balance, and sadly it won't be the last. So this is where the debate has moved to. It has been, almost universal, and it is absolutely one-sided when you come down to it. If you think back to November last year, I think it was, UCL put out a report about the contribution that EU migrants are making to the UK, a £25 billion contribution, which they bring with them, with their work, with their skills, with their work, and their acumen. And basically, that is, if you look at the mainstream media now, it's as if that report never existed. There's no reference to it. There's no coming back to it at all. It's quite alarming. And I think there's a real need at the moment to call out the racism that exists. I think everyone's being a bit too polite about it. I think there's a real reluctance to actually point the finger. When Nigel Farage gave that interview, and he said he'd be very worried about Romanians moving in next door to him, it reminded me of a quote from an election back in the 1960s in Sandwell, where the Tory pamphlet just said, if you want a nigger for a neighbour, vote Labour. You can put, if you want a Romanian for a Labour, don't vote UKIP. And actually, you make those parallels. We have to start calling out the racism which exists in the British immigration debate.
One thing I did love about nursing in Britain was safeguarding children. And only thing you can find on YouTube, the media, the only thing you can find on YouTube when you talk about FGM is a child being caught, the process of a child being caught. You hear them scream and shout. Yet we are saying, let's safeguard our children. Will it be different if that child was another color? I think that's something I always say, let's go home and think about it. If I'm doing a workshop about FGM and the first thing I put on there for people to watch is a child being caught, how do you feel about it as a person, as a mom, as a dad, as a sister? Because it's on YouTube. There are more than 1,000. I can't even, and it's there even on Her Majesty website. And I do think that it's such a shame that we're talking about keeping our children safe, yet we can show people cutting them and screaming in pain, and show their legs being bowed, and show them bleeding.
Somehow had racism. My question is, how are migrants, because I'm directing the question to you, because it's a very powerful point you've raised. How about the racism that Africans are visiting against themselves? Because I would like Migrant Voice or any other institution to commission a research as to why the black landlords are not, renting houses to their fellow black people. I would like to know that, because it may be a controversial issue anyway, but that's my point. I heard this one-sided story. Yes, the racism is there. Even the Prime Minister himself, 2 years ago or last year, asked migrants to be reporting their fellow migrants who are staying here illegally. He said it openly.
Yes.
When Theresa May withdrew the controversial ban, up to today the Prime Minister has not withdrawn his statement. He stands by it. So how about the racism that Africans are visiting against themselves? I want to know.
Unfortunately, that is so complex because it goes back to our culture and our tradition. If you can look at the history of how we were colonized and everything, we were never colonized to be together. We were colonized to work against each other. And unfortunately, it has carried on even in this country. And I don't think there's anyone that can cure that except ourselves. There's no one else who can come from outside and cure that. And you're right. Unfortunately, black Africans, migrants, we do not support each other. And sometimes it's fear. If I'm an asylum seeker, I do not want another person to know I'm an asylum seeker, because when things like those crop up, we report each other. Other nations, other people, they don't, but we are good at it, and it's something that we learn from a very early age, and we've never been working together in partnership from where we were born. That's how I see it.
Saying second generation and then migrants, migration by definition is moving from one area to another, and academicians, researchers, everybody uses second generation migrants. When does a person stop being a migrant? When does that have go? And then secondly, talking about integrating second generation people. If I was born here, if I was raised here, how dare you tell me to integrate where I was born and raised? So even the issues around terminology, and for so many campaigns and for other things, I work for a women's organization, so we use terminologies and how we use terms. They're very powerful, and what to use and not to use. Even the abbreviation BME or BAME, is it about ethnicity? Is it about color? Is it about geographical location? Because BAME, Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, refugees. So are we lumping everybody together? Even the terminology, even within us that we use, should we be examining how we use terminology?
Okay.
The tragedy is, unfortunately, we need to look at this society. We're told, it's repeated, supposedly, a democracy. The reality is, there used to be a chap, previous Lord Chancellor, admittedly in opposition, a gentleman called Lord Hailsham, Conservative government, in opposition. He said the kind of system of governance, bearing in mind he'd studied law, the kind of system of governance we have in this country is an elective dictatorship. This is the sort of society we live in. Now, if we look at the Houses of Parliament, if you go there as a member of the public, what do you call a stranger, as if you shouldn't be there?
And I think it's hugely important to have migrant voices, not only in the media public debate, but in the things that all of us read, and particularly people who are at school and university might read. So I would like people, please, to come in and tell me things, because I really want to listen. I get a lot from my colleagues at Migrant Voice, but from you who are here, I'd like that opportunity to hear from you and to put some of that into what I'm working on over the next year.
It is a very hopeful side of it. The migrants feel that they are integrated. I'm here for more than 40 years, and it shows my age. I went to first work in Tower Hamlets and now Chief of JCWI, Guy is my colleague. So when I went to Tower Hamlets, I saw a place where I used to be on weekly basis, sometimes on daily basis, spattered by people. Like Sister here, Virginia, you're talking about how the integration is a two-way process. I felt that I'm still, in some circles, cannot be integrated. Okay, so this kind of thing. But you look at Tower Hamlets now, half of Tower Hamlets, population is mainly Bangladeshi and Somali there. And they feel very comfortable there. And the people go there, Brick Lane, people go there, visit. You come any evening, there is thousands and thousands of people there. So hopeful sign is changes. We are not here to fight against each other. We are here to live together in harmony with each other. And the point that Sister made about African communities and everything, we want to live in harmony, and we want to be intelligent, clever, and give that messaging in a way that we are accepted. That's what the comment I want.